The USS Gerald R weighs 100,000 tons. It carries 90 aircraft, 5,000 sailors, and roughly $13 billion of American steel. It was designed to disappear into the vastness of the ocean, one dot in a system of dots, shielded by electronic warfare, by stealth, by the sheer size of the sea. Today, somewhere at a command desk in Tehran, a screen shows exactly where it is, its speed, its bearing, its escort ring. The data refreshes every few minutes. It is not coming from an Iranian satellite. Iran does not have satellites that can do this. It is coming from Beijing. For the first time since the Cold War, a regional power in the Middle East has borrowed the eyes, the brain, and the guidance system of a superpower. Not just rented, not just leased, integrated. Iran did not build a navy to match the Fifth Fleet. It did something much cheaper, much faster, and much more dangerous. It plugged itself into the Chinese military internet. The result is an almost invisible kill chain. Chinese satellites see, Chinese navigation guides, Iranian missiles and underwater drones strike, and the price tag of a US aircraft carrier just dropped by about 99%, because you no longer need to match it to threaten it, you just need to see it. In the next 15 minutes, we are going to walk through how this happened, who paid for it, and why the number at the bottom of your gasoline receipt is about to be the most visible sign of a war that has already started. To understand how we got here, we have to go back to March 2021. That month, in Tehran, two men signed a document almost no Western newspaper read in full. Mohammad Javad Zarif, Iran's foreign minister at the time, and Wang Yi on the Chinese side. The document is public. It runs 25 years. It covers energy, banking, telecoms, ports, infrastructure, nuclear cooperation, and, buried in the fine print, modern technology. Everyone noticed the money. $400 billion over 25 years. Chinese investments against discounted Iranian oil. That is the headline number. But the real clause was in the technology section, and it had one acronym that mattered: BeiDou. BeiDou is China's GPS, except BeiDou has 45 operational satellites in orbit, against 24 for the American system. Its civilian signal is accurate to 5 meters, like GPS. Its military signal is accurate to less than 1 meter, versus 10 centimeters of claimed precision for authorized users. And unlike GPS, it has an encrypted two-way message channel that lets a ground operator talk to a missile up to 2,000 kilometers away, mid-flight, after launch, after the target has moved. What Iran obtained in 2021 was access to the military signal, the encrypted one, the one that China only shares with its closest strategic partners, a privilege Pakistan has, a privilege Russia does not fully have, and a privilege that, until that moment, no Western intelligence service believed Iran would ever be granted. The groundwork was older than the signing. A memorandum back in 2015 had already put Chinese ground reference stations on Iranian soil. A space data collection center was being built in Keshem, a small island most tourists know for its coral reefs. What the tourists did not know was that Keshem also hosts IRGC surveillance facilities, missile storage, and the bases for the fast boats that now haunt every shipping report out of the Gulf. By the time the first Israeli jets crossed into Iranian airspace in June 2025, this infrastructure had been quietly switched on. The 12-day war that followed would be the stress test. Iran launched more than 500 ballistic missiles and over 1,000 loitering drones at Israel in 12 days. At first, Israeli air defenses intercepted almost everything. Then, something changed. Around day 4, the terminal phase accuracy of Iranian missiles improved. Strikes landed on Tel Nof Air Base, on Soroka Hospital, on high-value infrastructure. Former French intelligence officials noted in public that Iranian missiles are suddenly more accurate. They were too polite to finish the sentence. The reason is simple. The missiles had stopped talking to the American constellation and started talking to the Chinese one. Israel tried to jam the signals. That is what Israel does, better than almost anyone else in the world. But the B3A military signal of BeiDou 3 uses frequency hopping and navigation message authentication. In plain language, it is unspoofable. You cannot lie to it about where it is. The Israeli electronic warfare bubble, designed over 2 decades to neutralize exactly this kind of threat, found itself trying to break a lock it did not have the key to. That was the test. Iran passed it, and China took notes. A handful of analysts in Washington saw the implication immediately. A Chinese satellite does not need a basing agreement. A Chinese satellite does not need a flag ceremony in a friendly port. It does not need an overflight authorization from Turkey or Jordan or Egypt. It is already there, over the Gulf, 90 minutes out of every hour, every day, in orbits that were mapped and paid for a decade ago. To rent the equivalent American capability, Iran would have needed a functional space program. To use the Chinese one, Iran only needed a cable, an antenna, and a password. The password was in the 2021 partnership document, and almost nobody read it. Here is the sentence that matters, and it comes from a March 2026 Small Wars Journal analysis that Pentagon planners read more carefully than any press release. Quote, "Chinese satellites provide surveillance and targeting intelligence. Iranian missiles and drones carry out the kinetic strike." End quote. 6 words hidden inside a military report. Bifurcated kill chain. Meaning the old sequence, find, fix, track, target, engage, assess, no longer has to live inside one country. China does the find, the fix, the track. Iran does the engage. China does the post-strike assessment. The sovereign border between the two states becomes irrelevant because data travels at the speed of light and satellites do not carry passports. The hardware behind it is already in orbit. The Yaogan constellation, 30-plus reconnaissance satellites, specialized in maritime electronic intelligence, capable of geolocating a U.S. destroyer through its own radio emissions using time difference of arrival. Revisit intervals measured in minutes. Not hours, minutes. That means a carrier strike group cannot move more than 50 nautical miles between 2 satellite passes without being seen twice. Then the Jilin 1 network. Over 100 high-resolution optical and video microsatellites run by a company called Changguang Satellite Technology, sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury in April 2025 for exactly this reason, supplying imagery to Iranian proxies. Their resolution is good enough to count the people on a flight deck. Their video feed can follow a ship for 90 seconds per pass. Then the Galfen platforms, synthetic aperture radar, hyperspectral imaging, the ability to see through cloud cover, through smoke, through camouflage. The U.S. Navy has spent 40 years building stealth into its surface fleet. Galfen was designed from day one to defeat exactly that kind of stealth. And on top of that, BeiDou, not just guidance, communication. A 2-way encrypted link that lets a drone operator in Tehran update the flight profile of a Shahed missile crossing over the Euphrates in real time using satellite bandwidth that the US cannot jam. 2,000 kilometers of reach. That is Baghdad to Riyadh. That is Tehran to Jerusalem. That is the Bab al-Mandeb Strait to the Persian Gulf, in a single link. Now layer the weapons on top. On the surface, the IRGC Navy has been quietly expanding its fleet of midget submarines and missile boats, sub-200-ton submersibles that are almost invisible to sonar in the shallow acoustic mess of the Gulf, carrying torpedoes, sea mines, and, since early 2025, the Hadid 110. The Hadid 110 is the first operational submarine-launched loitering munition in the world. The drone comes out of the water, unfolds its wings mid-air, identifies targets using onboard AI image recognition, and dives. Under the surface, the Ajdar, an unmanned underwater vehicle built by the IRGC. Lithium battery electric propulsion, meaning almost no acoustic signature. Range of more than 600 kilometers. Endurance of 4 days. Diving depth of 200 meters. Warhead of 50 kilograms of high-energy explosive, probably CL-20 or a derivative. speed of 25 knots on the top end. It does not have to hit anything at 25 knots to ruin a destroyer's day. It just has to be there. And above the surface, the Shahed. 57,000 of them launched against Ukraine since 2022. Production now above 1,000 units per week. Chinese-sourced electronics, Chinese engines, Chinese onboard computers. Every week, a new variant. The Shahed 238 uses software-defined radios that hop frequencies faster than a defensive EW station can chase them. And the kicker, since June 2025, guided by BeiDou. Against this stack, the United States Navy has roughly 3 aircraft carriers it can keep in the Middle East at the same time. 3. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the USS Abraham Lincoln, the USS George H.W. Bush pulled out of pre-retirement. 30% of all available Arleigh Burke destroyers are already committed to this one theater. 60% of mission-capable B-1 bombers. 70% of E-3 AWACS aircraft, one of which was severely damaged by an Iranian drone on March 27, 2026. 16 MQ-9 Reapers lost in 4 weeks, a bill between $250 and $900 million depending on the variant. The math is brutal. A Reaper costs $30 million, a Shahed costs $80,000, a carrier costs $13 billion, an Ajdar underwater drone costs about the price of a suburban house. The exchange rate of this war is 5 figures against 9 figures, and the only reason it has not tipped already is that the US is burning through its irreplaceable platforms at the speed of an asymmetric budget. Here is where the geopolitical story becomes a balance sheet. On February 28, 2026, US and Israeli forces launched Operation Epic Fury. Surprise airstrikes during active negotiations, targeting Iranian military sites, nuclear facilities, leadership. Ali Khamenei was killed in his Tehran office. His son, Mojtaba Khamenei, was installed as supreme leader 4 days later by an assembly of experts under pressure from IRGC commanders. The clerical state became a military state in 96 hours. On March 2nd, an IRGC senior officer announced the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. By March 4th, Brent crude broke above $120 a barrel. By March 10th, OPEC members outside Iran had lost 6.7 million barrels per day of combined output. By March 12th, that number was above 10 million. The International Energy Agency called it the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Roughly 20% of the world's oil, and almost 100% of Qatari LNG, flows through a stretch of water 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest. 80% of that traffic goes to Asia. Europe depends on the strait for 25 to 30% of its jet fuel. India gets 85% of its liquefied petroleum gas through it. And half of the global urea and sulfur trade, the raw materials of fertilizer, rides the same route. When Brent hit $120 a barrel, the direct transmission belts kicked in. Global fertilizer prices projected 15 to 20% higher in the first half of 2026. Gulf food import chains disrupted for 70% of the region's caloric intake by mid-March. Desalination plants in Kuwait and Qatar hit by Iranian strikes, the plants that produce 99% of their drinking water. A fiscal shock sliding 1 week at a time into a humanitarian shock. Now ask the question the Atlantic Council is asking behind closed doors. Why did the world's most expensive military struggle to silence a country with a defense budget of $23 billion, roughly 2.5% of what the Pentagon spends in a single year? The answer is not that America got weaker. The answer is that Iran got plugged in. A fighter jet in the 1990s was a national product, designed, built, tested, flown by a single country. A Chinese satellite in 2026 is a shared product. The hardware is Chinese, the data pipeline is Chinese, the customer is Iran, the target is American. The missile that hits the American is Chinese-guided, Iranian-fired, Iranian-maintained, funded by Chinese oil imports, protected by Chinese diplomatic cover at the UN Security Council. Every node in the kill chain has a different passport. The US Treasury has tried to break the financial layer. Chinese teapot refineries have been sanctioned. Shadow fleet tankers blacklisted. Intermediate Chinese companies designated for shipping sodium perchlorate, 1,000 tons of it, enough to fuel between 200 and 300 Hajj Qassam missiles. Treasury keeps pulling the handle. The number of designations keeps going up. The oil keeps moving. Because at the bottom of the trade is a simple fact. China buys roughly 90% of Iran's exported oil. That is tens of billions of dollars per year, flowing into a government that spends 40% of its budget on the IRGC. Every liter of gasoline refined in a teapot plant in Shandong is a liter of political cover for the next missile launch at an American base. So the real bill does not arrive as a defense budget line. It arrives at the pump. It arrives at the supermarket. It arrives as a 15% jump in nitrogen fertilizer prices for European farmers who have not even heard of BeiDou. It arrives in your household energy bill. The war is being fought with satellites and submarines and data links. It is being paid for with everyone else's groceries. Here is the detail that Pentagon planners, off record, keep returning to. The BeiDou signal that guides an Iranian missile is the same BeiDou signal that guides a Chinese fishing boat in the South China Sea. The same signal that updates your package delivery time if you live in Shanghai. The same satellite architecture is now a consumer utility, a trading infrastructure, and a weapons guidance system. It is all the same wire, which means the problem is not Iran. It was never really Iran. Iran is the customer. The architecture belongs to someone else. The moment another regional power decides the American terms are too expensive, and Ankara, Caracas, Pyongyang, maybe Riyadh one day, the same menu is on the table. Satellites, navigation, anti-ship missiles, underwater drones. Pick 3. Pay in oil or gold. Receive delivery in one Y-20 cargo plane. The franchise model of modern warfare. The question that nobody in Washington is answering out loud is the simplest one. What does a US aircraft carrier even mean in a world where a $23 billion defense budget plugged into a foreign satellite can track it, target it, and price it by the hour? The answer may already be sitting in the drawer of the Chief of Naval Operations, written, signed, unread. The Atlantic Council tracker updates daily. The carriers move, the satellites watch, the missiles wait, and somewhere in Tehran, a screen refreshes every few minutes, and the dot on the map keeps moving. The sea used to be the American moat. Now it is a chessboard, and someone else brought the camera. And the most disquieting detail is the one that almost never makes the front page. The Chinese embassy in Washington has flatly denied every weapons shipment, every satellite transfer, every sanction the Treasury has announced. The denials are public. The Y-20 cargo planes keep landing at Iranian air bases anyway. The official position and the operational reality have quietly become two separate countries. And that gap, that silent, organized gap between what is said and what is done, may be the most accurate picture of the world we live in now. The fleet is at sea. The satellite is overhead. The price is coming.